Hello world, I just wanted to come to you very quickly with the news that I've been waiting for a long time. Haven't I moaned about it? Where's the Brio amplifier? The Brio amplifier disappeared over a year ago now, I think it would have been. And it has just been reintroduced. So I've done a bit of research on this, and Terry Bateman, who was Rega's in-house amplifier designer, has just handed over the mantle to a guy called Ashton Wagner, who is now the amp designer. And this new Brio Mk7, which I'm here and pleased to announce, is his new baby. It's his new project. And I suspect that this Ashton Wagner guy has had his hand all over the recent amplifiers from Rega, such as the Illicit Mark 5 and the Elex Mark 4 and the IO, I suspect. I'm saying that because of the fact that the amplifiers are now getting all of these new digital inputs to them. So what I really want to do in this video is talk a bit about why you might want to, even if you've got a System 1 with a P1 record player, IO amplifier and Rega Kite speakers, I want to talk about why I think that the Brio would be a better amplifier in that system. What the upgrade is going to bring to the party. The problem lies not so much in the amplifier but in speakers. Smaller speakers require more power from amplifiers than larger speakers do. To take that to its absolute extremes, a massive pair of Tannoy Westminsters in your room could be driven on a valve amplifier with only maybe 6 to 10 watts per channel. The smaller speakers tend to be much less sensitive. Now, a magic ideal sensitivity would be 90 decibels or above in a pair of speakers, and the smaller ones tend to be sort of hovering around the 80s, maybe a bit better now. Something like maybe 88 decibels might be quite a good figure for a smaller speaker. Now, that only sounds like 2 decibels, it sounds like that, but it actually isn't, because the decibel scale is not logarithmic. 3 decibels either way is either a doubling or halving of sensitivity. So 2 decibels short of that 90 decibel ideal figure means that you've got a speaker that is roughly half as sensitive. So a lot is not unknown for those small bookshelf speakers such as the Kites, although I don't know about the sensitivity of the Kites, but small bookshelf speakers quite often can go down to 84 decibels, something like that, which means that they're a blooming hard drive, which means they need more power to drive them. The IO that comes with the System 1 is 38 watts per channel, which is nominally into 8 ohm speakers. A little bit higher if you're going into 6 ohm speakers, such as most of Rega's speakers are 6 ohms, maybe about sort of 50 watts into 6 ohms. The new Brio Mk7, such as it is, the first one was April 1991, the 7th iteration is March 2025, 34 years later, which is in line roughly with Brios of the recent past, which means that it's going to have an easier job to drive less sensitive speakers, which means it should find the whole thing presenting a little bit more of a relaxed sound. In terms of specs over the IO, you do have an extra line input. So whereas the IO had a phono stage and 2 line inputs, the Brio has a phono stage and 3 line inputs. However, it also has 2 digital inputs, a coaxial input and optical input. It also has, and this is something that until they mentioned it, I thought, why hasn't every other blooming Rega amplifier had this? And it's just such a simple thing. it's got a standby mode on it. If you haven't used your amp for an hour or so, it's going to go into standby mode and it'll wake up again when you start to use it. And that just seems so simple and so normal for just about every other amplifier component, and Rega have only just started doing it. Welcome to the 1980s, Rega, where that was de rigueur on just about every product. Right, now there's no USB input. I've moaned about this before. As you know, this is my Rega hi-fi mode. Where's the blooming USB inputs? However, there were comments when I was talking about the I/O a couple of weeks ago. There were a few comments that said you can actually buy an adapter that you can plug into one of the line inputs. It will convert it to a USB socket, and then you can take a USB out from your laptop or computer and plug that in. I am joined in this moan by none other than the esteemed Jason Kennedy. He of Hi-Fi Choice magazine back in the day, and of a few other hi-fi titles. Now he writes for an online publication called The Ear. Rega published his review on their X Twitter feed, and in his review, one of his concerns is still this lack of USB compatibility, because it's just what normal kids use. If you're targeting this at people with their first few £1,000s that they've earned as a job in their early 20s, then it's so churlish not to include a USB socket, so that at least you can take your Spotify's out of your mobile phones, your laptops, whatever, and plug them in. I'm growling at it again! I'm growling at it again! However, if you do have a laptop with, and I didn't make this fully clear last time, so I'll make it clear this time. If you do have a laptop with a headphone out socket, do check, because the ordinary 3.5mm headphone socket is the same plug as on an optical digital cable. You may be able to convert it to an optical output instead of an analog output. The analog output going into a line input on an amplifier will sound awful. It certainly did when I used to do that with an iMac. Getting a digital lead, you might have to go into a little utility such as the audio MIDI setup on a Mac and turn it on, but you can or might be able to change the output of that headphone socket to a digital output, which will go into the optical socket of your amplifier, and it will sound much better. Now, in terms of the general sound quality, I haven't heard it. It's brand new. Jason Kennedy has got an earlier sample, obviously. He has reviewed the sound and said that in comparison with some Rega amplifiers, although he didn't say which, this is a much smoother and calmer example. Now, I have heard older Brios in different setups, and I have thought, yeah, that's a little bit bright. I did do, it's so long ago now that it's, I think it would have been the Brio 2, which was released in 1996. I did have a listen of that. And in comparison with the Luna, which I ended up buying, which was the next step up, the Luna had much more control than the Brio. The Brio was a bit bright. The Elex R, which I used to have, was also a bit on the bright side. The Luna, although not as bright as the original Brio that I first heard, was still bright. The Mirror 3 and the Illicit R, which I have now, and the Mirror 3, which I ran for many, many years previously, were both very, very smooth sounding amplifiers. So I would expect that this Brio takes a leaf out of their book and is a much smoother and refined character. It doesn't necessarily mean that it hasn't got any rhythm and pace and timing. Rega amps are always famous for that, so you can dance to it. It will make you jiggle around in your seat, tap your toes, whatever, but it's just a little bit more civilized. Really, that's all I've got to say about this Brio. It's Brio-LANT. A great amplifier, I've no doubt. I'm sure it'll sound great. I think it might even be, because of the digital input capabilities, it might even be something that I would replace if I had a System 1 and I had to think about upgrading it. It might be making that upgrade the first upgrade, even above. I know that in an analog system you should always be thinking about, you know, the making sure that the best component should be the source, the analog turntable, but in this case I wouldn't, because I think that today's teenagers are going to at least want some way of being able to play their digital and online content, to be able to play their games through it and their Xboxes and whatnot. Then of course stick a P3 on a Brio. P3 Brio kites. A System 2. Right, I am going to wave you goodbye here. Remember to like, subscribe, share if you dare, and consider a super thanks if you've enjoyed this video by clicking on the heart down below. Love you.